The black boy was sitting quietly in class. The teacher walked up to him, took out a pair of scissors, and cut his hair without asking. Some students laughed, some looked away. The teacher thought it was just hair. She thought it didn't matter. But to him it meant respect, it meant pride. In front of everyone, she tried to shame him. But when the truth came out, it wasn't the boy who was embarrassed, it was the teacher. The classroom buzzed with the low hum of chatter as Trey made his way to the podium at the front. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat. His heart thudded, not from nerves about the history project, but from the heavy stares waiting to find something wrong. He straightened his shoulders and began. Today our group will be presenting Ms. Griffin's voice sliced through the air. Hold it right there. Trey froze, hands tightening slightly at his sides. She stepped forward, heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. Her eyes narrowed at his hair, natural, thick, untamed. Is this really how you think a representative of your group should present himself? She asked loud enough for everyone to hear. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Trey kept his tone steady. I'm here to present our work, not my appearance. Ms. Griffin laughed short, sharp. Work is important, yes, but presentation matters. You're standing there, looking unprepared, disrespectful. Trey clenched his jaw but didn't look away. I respect my culture. I respect myself, he said evenly. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Ms. Griffin turned to the class, spreading her arms theatrically. Would any of you want someone looking like this representing you at the district showcase? A murmur rolled across the room, some glanced down. Others avoided Trey's eyes. Ms. Griffin didn't wait. She strode to her desk, snatched a pair of scissors from the drawer, and turned back. The click of the blades echoed in the silent room. If no one taught you how to look respectable, she said coldly, consider this your first lesson. The class held its breath as Miss Griffin marched back toward Trey's scissors, glinting under the fluorescent lights. Trey didn't move. His hands rested calmly at his sides. Tilt your head, she ordered, her voice sharp. When he didn't respond, she stepped even closer. With a swift, practiced motion, she grabbed a handful of his curls near the front and snipped. The sound was too loud in the silence. Gasps rippled across the room. Trey stood still, feeling the sudden lightness at the side of his head. A small clump of hair fluttered to the floor by his shoes. Ms. Griffin held up the chopped hair for everyone to see. Now, she said, with a cold smile that's a little more presentable. The scissors dangled loosely in her hand as she turned away. Clearly satisfied, Trey looked down at the fallen curls. Slowly, he bent, picked them up with careful fingers, and tucked them gently into his jacket pocket. No one laughed. No one moved. Even the class clown sat frozen, mouth slightly open. Ms. Griffin returned to her desk, tapping the scissors against her palm like a gavel ending a trial. Trey straightened. His face was calm, but something in his eyes had changed, harder now, sharper. He walked back to his seat, silent. The classroom was so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock seemed deafening. As Trey passed Miss Griffin's desk, he paused, just enough to make her glance up, impatient. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. His words were quiet, but they landed heavy. You didn't cut my hair. He looked her straight in the eye. You cut your own future. Ms. Griffin stiffened slightly but masked it with a tight smile. Get back to your seat, Trey, she said dismissively. Trey said nothing more. He walked back to his chair, sat down slowly, and folded his hands on the desk. Around him, the classroom sat in brittle, uncomfortable silence. Some kids stared at their notebooks, some glanced at him, then quickly away. In the front of the room, Ms. Griffin cleared her throat and tried to continue with the lesson, her voice just a little less steady than before. Trey sat quietly, waiting. Not defeated, just waiting. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. It wasn't polished, it was shaky, shot from the back of the room on a student's phone, but it showed everything. Ms. Griffin's voice, the scissors flashing, Trey standing still while his hair fell. The title under the first TikTok post read, Teacher cuts. Black student's hair during class, Mason High. Do better. By lunch period, it had over 500,000 views. Students huddled in corners, phones tilted toward each other, whispering, "Dude, it's blowing up. They're tagging news channels. Some lawyer already reposted it." Trey walked through the halls, feeling the shift, not in sympathy. In tension, teachers' eyes darted away when he passed. Some students looked guilty, others just scared. At the front office, the receptionist's smile was tight and brittle when she handed Trey a yellow slip. "Principal Monroe wants to see you." Trey folded the paper slowly. He turned toward the office, calm as ever. Behind him, whispers grew louder. "Is he gonna get expelled? They can't expel him, right?" Inside the principal's office, Monroe sat stiffly behind his desk. He didn't ask Trey to sit. He just cleared his throat and said, "We're reviewing the incident, Trey. It would be helpful if you refrained from discussing it publicly." Trey met his gaze steady. Helpful to who, he asked. The principal shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Trey didn't come to school the next day or the day after that. By Friday, his desk sat empty, a silent reminder at the back of room 214. Ms. Griffin continued teaching as if nothing had happened. She never mentioned Trey's name. She barely looked toward his empty chair. Students noticed. They noticed everything. At lunch, Jamal sat with the usual group, but didn't say much. He scrolled through his phone, glanced at Trey's profile, thumb hovering over the message button. He put the phone down. Across the cafeteria, Mia whispered to her friend, "Did you see they said the district's investigating?" "Yeah, but he's kinda overreacting, right? It was just hair." The words stung more than anyone admitted. By Monday, some students started unfollowing Trey's social media. It wasn't personal, they told themselves. They just didn't want trouble. At home, Trey watched it happen. Follower count, dropping, group chats going silent. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, scrolling through texts that no one answered anymore. His mother knocked lightly on the door. "You okay?" Trey didn't look up. "I'm fine." He wasn't angry yet. He wasn't planning revenge yet. He was just alone. And somewhere inside that silence, something cold and sharp started to grow. Monday afternoon, the front office doors swung open. A man in a charcoal gray suit walked in, tall, composed, carrying a leather briefcase. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the linoleum floor. Mrs. Evans, the front desk receptionist, looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" The man gave a small, polite smile. "Just here to deliver a document," he said smoothly. He handed her a thick, sealed envelope with a single line written across the front, "Mason High School Administration. Urgent attention required." Before Mrs. Evans could ask anything else, the man nodded, turned, and left as quietly as he had come. No name, no explanation. Principal Monroe was called down immediately. He tore the envelope open in front of Mrs. Evans and a few nervous teachers inside. A formal letter from a civil rights legal firm, a notice of pending investigation into racially biased practices, a list of witnesses requested for interviews, a cover page signed by Marcus Ellis, Senior Counsel, Ellis Foundation for Educational Equality. Monroe's hands trembled slightly as he read. At the bottom of the cover letter, one final line stood out in bold. "You are being watched." For the first time all week, the principal didn't know what to say. Trey returned to school on Wednesday. He walked through the hall with quiet steps, head high. His hair was trimmed now, tight, clean lines, but still natural. Still him students parted instinctively as he passed. Some whispered. Some pretended he wasn't there. Ms. Griffin stood at the doorway of room 214 talking to another teacher. She caught sight of Trey and stiffened. Trey met her eyes. No anger. No fear. Just steady, silent recognition. Miss Griffin cleared her throat and turned away quickly, laughing a little too loudly at whatever the other teacher had said. In the classroom, Trey sat at his usual seat near the back. Notebook, open pen ready. He didn't speak, but the air around him felt heavier, sharper, and no one, Not even Ms. Griffin dared to call on him. By Friday, flyers went up around school. The annual honor assembly was coming, and students were invited to submit speeches on pride and gratitude. Trey signed up. First, Ms. Griffin noticed. Her lips curled into a tight smile. "Well," she said under her breath, "let's see if you learned your lesson about appearances." Trey handed her the sign-up sheet without a word. After school, he met Marcus at the old public library downtown. They sat at a corner table, 2 laptops open, pages of notes spread out. Marcus leaned in. "You ready for them?" Trey tapped his pen once against the table. "No speeches for them," he said. "Only truth." Marcus nodded, a proud glint in his eyes. Outside, the sky was turning a heavy, determined gray. Every afternoon, Trey and Marcus met in the same quiet corner of the library. No grand speeches, no dramatic rehearsals, just practice precision. Trey stood at the table speaking his lines out loud. Marcus sat across from him, listening carefully, interrupting only when needed. "Don't rush it," Marcus said once, tapping his notebook. "Let the silence do the work." Trey adjusted, slowed his words, cut out anything extra. Every sentence had weight now. Every pause hit like a fist. One evening, after a particularly sharp run-through, Marcus closed his laptop and leaned back. "You know," he said, smiling slightly, "you don't just speak like your father. You fight like him, too." Trey didn't smile back. He wasn't ready yet. He picked up his notes, scanned them one last time, and said quietly, "They wanted me to be quiet. I'm going to make sure they hear me instead." Marcus nodded, pride clear in his face. Outside the library windows, the night deepened. Trey packed his papers carefully. He didn't feel like a kid anymore. He felt ready. The auditorium was packed. Students fidgeted in their chairs, parents murmured softly, and teachers lined the side aisles. Bright lights washed the stage in a harsh, unforgiving glow. At the front row, Ms. Griffin sat straight-backed, a polished smile fixed on her face. She glanced at the printed program in her lap and scoffed lightly when she saw Trey's name. Behind the curtain, Trey adjusted the collar of his navy blazer. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. Principal Monroe stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming awkwardly into the space, and now representing our student body with a few words on pride and gratitude. Trey Ellis' polite applause broke out. Thin, uncertain. Trey walked out slowly. The lights hit him full in the face. He didn't blink. Every step was deliberate, heavy with purpose. He reached the podium, set down a single sheet of paper, and looked up. Hundreds of faces stared back. Some curious, some bored, some expectant. Ms. Griffin's smile widened, confident. Trey adjusted the microphone with a soft click. He took a breath, not to calm himself, but to measure the room. His voice came steady, quiet but clear. "Good afternoon." The room hushed instantly. "I was asked to speak about gratitude today." Trey continued, eyes never leaving the crowd. He paused, let the words hang, "and I will." But first, his hand moved casually to the laptop, set beside the podium. He clicked a button. The giant screen behind him flickered to life. The screen blinked, once, then steadied. There, larger than life, played the shaky cell phone footage. The classroom, Trey, standing still. Ms. Griffin's sharp voice slicing the air. "Tilt your head." The audience shifted, confused. Ms. Griffin's figure moved across the screen, scissors flashing. The soft, brutal snip echoed through the auditorium's speakers. A gasp rippled through the crowd. On screen, Trey bent down, slowly picking up his fallen curls. The video ended on his calm, cutting words. "You didn't cut my hair, you cut your own future." Silence complete, utter. Ms. Griffin's smile cracked. Her hands clutched the edges of her program until it crumpled. From somewhere near the back, a student's voice rose sharp and stunned. "What the hell?" Trey stepped back from the laptop. He didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He simply looked out at them and spoke into the silence. "This happened in your school." His voice was calm, slicing through the thick air. Not years ago, not somewhere else. Right here. He reached into his blazer and pulled out a letter. Effective immediately, Trey said, "The Ellis Foundation has withdrawn all sponsorship from Mason High School." Murmurs turned into full-on whispers. Teachers stiffened. Parents leaned forward, mouths open. Trey's eyes found Miss Griffin's across the stunned crowd. He didn't blink. "Respect is earned," he said quietly, "not cut out of someone else's dignity." He left the words hanging, and for the first time all year, Ms. Griffin had no answer. Trey didn't leave the stage. He stood steady at the podium, letting the murmurs swell and crash around him. He reached for the second sheet of paper, unfolded it slowly. "Some of you may not know," he said, voice low, but clear. "The Ellis Foundation isn't just a name at the bottom of your banners and scholarships." A pause. "It's my family." Shock rippled through the room like a wave. Teachers exchanged frantic glances. Parents sat bolt upright. Griffin's face went from pale to ghostly white. Trey continued each word deliberate. "The same foundation that funded your sports complex, your tech labs, and your special programs for the last 6 years. He locked eyes with Ms. Griffin, was created by my father." A stunned, heavy silence settled over the auditorium. Trey tucked the letter back into his pocket. He stepped away from the podium without a smile, without waiting for applause. At the last moment, he turned his head slightly toward the stunned crowd and said, "Gratitude isn't something you demand, it's something you earn." Then he walked off stage, his footsteps echoing loud and sure in the silence he left behind. By Monday, Ms. Griffin was gone. The school announced her resignation over a short, clipped email. No ceremony, no farewell. Students passed the news from locker to locker in hurried whispers. In the teacher's lounge, no one said her name out loud. An official statement was posted outside Principal Monroe's office. "Mason High does not tolerate any actions that undermine the dignity and respect of our students." But everyone knew they hadn't acted until they were forced. Local news stations swarmed the school gates, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Monroe dodged them with tight smiles and vague answers. Inside, teachers handed out forms for optional sensitivity training. It was too late. The Ellis Foundation's complete withdrawal gutted major programs overnight. The prestigious district showcase canceled. Plans for a new science wing scrapped. Parents pulled donations, alumni pulled endorsements, and Mason High's spotless reputation cracked wide open. In the end, Ms. Griffin wasn't just erased. She became a stain the school couldn't scrub clean. 2 weeks later, Trey stood at a different podium. This one wasn't in a school gym. It was at the State Youth Leadership Summit in front of a crowd of thousands. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Trey wore a simple, dark suit. No flash, no extra shine. His hair was natural. He stepped up to the microphone, voice, steady room, silent. "They tried to cut me down," he said. "But you can't trim away someone's worth." A ripple of applause. Trey paused. Let the words breathe. "The way we look, the way we stand. Those aren't flaws to fix. They're roots to grow from." Another wave of claps, stronger this time. He smiled slightly. Not the smile of victory, but the smile of someone who knew exactly who he was. "Gratitude," he said, voice lifting. "I'm grateful for every time someone tried to break me, because it showed me just how unbreakable I am." The crowd rose to their feet, not out of sympathy, out of respect. Trey stepped back, chest high, heart steady. He wasn't standing in their shadow anymore. He had built his own light. Weeks later, Trey walked the quiet halls of the public library. No cameras, no crowds, just the familiar hush of pages turning and soft footsteps. He was heading toward the exit when a voice called out behind him, "Excuse me." Trey turned. A boy, maybe 12, stood there, clutching a worn backpack. His hair was natural, thick, wild. He looked nervous, eyes darting around before he spoke. "I saw you at the summit," the boy said quickly. I wore my hair like this because of you. Trey smiled, small but real. He stepped closer, crouching a little to meet the boy's eyes. How do you feel? Trey asked. The boy shifted his weight, then said, scared but proud. Trey nodded. Good, he said. That means you're doing it right. They stood there a moment, two versions of the same battle generations apart. Trey ruffled the boy's hair gently. Don't let them shrink you, he said quietly. You take up all the space you need. The boy grinned wide, clutching his backpack tighter. Trey straightened, gave him a short nod, and walked out into the sunlight. This time he wasn't walking away from anything. He was walking toward something bigger.